Hey ChatGPT, write the next video intro. In this video, we'll explore ways authors can use OpenAI's ChatGPT to enhance their writing process. From breaking through writer's block to developing characters and plot lines, ChatGPT can help writers of all levels take their craft to the next level. Join us as we discover this exciting possibility of using AI to streamline your writing. That's actually pretty accurate to this video. ChatGPT is an incredibly powerful tool that I think more writers should be leveraging in their day-to-day writing. So here are my top 4 ways you can use ChatGPT to improve your writing right now. First up is world building and characters. Right now, ChatGPT is just not capable of putting out polished, ready-to-go fiction. You can't just prompt it for a chapter, take what it outputs, and publish that as part of a book. It lacks style, it lacks realistic dialogue, and has poor writing skills overall. I feel like I'm grading somebody's paper here or something. But one way that you can be using ChatGPT right now is to develop world building, especially for fantasy and science fiction writers, and characters too, no matter your genre. When I used ChatGPT to write Legends of the Shadow Woods, I had it create all of the world building. And I didn't influence it with my own ideas aside from little details here and there. Though there were a lot of frustrations generating an entire book with ChatGPT, I actually thought world building was one of its greater strengths. Although what it came up with wasn't anything groundbreaking, it's a pretty helpful tool for fleshing out your existing world building. Not necessarily for creating the foundations like the magic system or something like that, but once you kind of get to the medium or smaller size details of your world building, like cultures or biomes or creatures, these are things that ChatGPT can help you with and save time on. Not only can you save time, but it can also come up with unique ideas. Though often, if you're not specific with prompting, you'll get pretty generic output. It can still spark new ideas by suggesting concepts or combinations you might not have seen right away. And for characters, you can use it much in the same way. You're probably not coming up with a whole character using ChatGPT, especially a main character, but it is definitely helpful if you want to, say, come up with side characters, or fleshing out a backstory, or getting details on how a certain character might look. So you can use ChatGPT to create these characters and who they might be, what their backstories could be, how they look, and some interesting details about them. I know I said ChatGPT writes blandly, but sometimes it does come up with unique combinations. So if you've already been using ChatGPT for some of your world building, or you have already established some of your world building with ChatGPT, you can use that as part of your character creation. So you can prompt something like, create a character from this place who has whatever traits you would like them to have, and it can take the information that you've already given it and it has already generated for you to create a more complex character profile all on its own. So right now, I would not recommend using what ChatGPT outputs to outline an entire book. I did it, but not very well. I mean that you shouldn't only use what ChatGPT suggests as your entire outline. I think that it is getting there. And GPT-4, which as of filming this video came out yesterday, could be better at this. But ChatGPT-3, right now, currently, just does not have the grasp of storytelling. It can create a basic outline for a story that will kind of follow 3-act structure. But these outlines lack underlying themes or depth. And if left to its own devices, the outlines typically lack almost any character development. Basically, you need tons of your own input to get a usable outline. That being said, I think ChatGPT is really helpful for us outliner types, and it can be helpful for pantsers as well. A whole bunch of non-outliners just clicked off this video, I know. So personally, I like to have the entire book figured out before I write it, more or less. This has changed throughout my different writing projects, but for me it works best if I have a solid idea of each chapter, including exactly what happens to who, and most importantly, the function of the story to both the character development and the plot. For both outliners and non-outliners, the ability to use ChatGPT for outlining is going to be similar. When I say outlining, I do not mean the grand overarching outline that us outliner types like to use, but I mean the little notes that a lot of non-outliners still like to keep for themselves as sort of a reference point for their ideas. Non-outliners still sometimes, write out notes of ideas before they write something, or they keep track of ideas for different chapters or scenes. This doesn't mean they're doing a crazy detailed outline, it just means they're keeping track of their ideas. But for the sake of this video, we'll call that outlining. So you can take your notes and expand on them. Or if you know you need some kind of event to happen, you can use it kind of like a writing prompt generator, like rolling some writing dice to get an idea. So basically, any kind of writer can use ChatGPT to outline on this smaller scale. This can be scene by scene or chapter by chapter. So let's say you need some ideas for what can happen next in the story. Like if your characters are in a tavern, I'm going to go with fantasy here because I'm a fantasy author. If your characters are in a tavern and you need something crazy to happen between them and some rival characters, you can have it spin up some ideas for you. Sometimes I know how a scene should end, but I don't necessarily know how to get there exactly. So that's where you can ask ChatGPT for some options. How can the scene end? What are some different conflicts that could happen in this scene? What's something crazy or funny that could happen in this scene? Maybe it won't give you an exact idea you can use, but maybe it'll give you two different ideas that you can combine together, and then you figured out how you want to end the scene. If we kind of go in the opposite direction, you can also use ChatGPT to help you outline on a much larger scale. This part is for my fellow outliners and planners. So when I'm outlining, I start with a 15-point outline for the entire story, and just gives me kind of a roadmap to follow for the rest of my more detailed outlining. It helps me keep the character arcs, the general flow of the story, and just gives me something to kind of work off while I'm outlining. So this is where you can bring in ChatGPT to come up with more of these basic but larger plot points. As long as you are steering the character development, this is very, very helpful. Even though GPT-3 can't really create an outline all on its own, you can most definitely use it to help fill in the blanks or generate ideas, which you can then apply to your existing story. If you know you need an exciting chase scene or something to push the character past a breaking point, you can use ChatGPT to generate ideas for your outline. You can get a handful of ideas in just a few seconds, and even if you don't use any of them, you might combine a few different ones, or they might just spark an entirely different idea of their own. Getting unstuck. There can be so many little variables when it comes to being stuck in your writing. It can be something wrong with the story, the character's motivations are wrong, your outline is not right, or maybe just the scene isn't working out how you originally planned it once you actually get to writing it. ChatGPT is very helpful for kickstarting ideas or helping you frame the scene differently so you can keep going. It can give you an idea you wouldn't have thought of, like a different direction for the scene to go, or it could totally spark a new idea on how a sequence of chapters could play out differently. Sometimes the problem is minor, and it's with the scene or the setting or a few lines of dialogue. But other times it can be a larger flaw in the story or character development that is slowing down a scene, and using ChatGPT to work through that can help you identify issues. So here's how you do it. Start with prompting ChatGPT to outline the scene you're trying to write. You want to take all the essential elements of the scene and put them into your prompt, and then prompt it for a detailed outline of a chapter with these details. Sometimes this is going to be enough to identify the problem, and that's awesome. But other times you'll need to go a little bit further. If this isn't working for you, you might want to try prompting again with something like, what are options for how the scene could go differently? Or what are some different ending options for the scene? Now, if this isn't working, try taking out some details from your prompt and just give it the bare minimum. Personally, I found that if you have too much influence when you're asking for an outline of something, whether that is a story or just a chapter, it won't have enough space to generate different options, and it will usually give you less helpful output if you are too specific with your prompt. I know this is super backwards from the usual way we use ChatGPT, which is giving it lots of detail in our prompt to make sure that the output is exactly what we're looking for. In this case, you kind of want your output to be not what you're looking for, if that makes sense. If you put too many restrictions on your prompt, if you give it too much detail about the scene, it will not have room to generate different options, different ideas. If you say 10 things that need to happen in the scene, it will kind of just give you those things in a list with some words in between to kind of fill in the blanks, but it won't give you like different things that can happen, different events or actions or characters. So that is where you actually sometimes need to pare back your prompt, which is really interesting. So if you're still struggling with this part, try and keep your prompt more basic. Another way you can use GPT to get unstuck is in a little bit more of a direct sense. By prompting it with the last few paragraphs that you wrote and then adding what happens next, ChatGPT will pick up the pen where you left off and keep writing. If you like what it outputs, then you can just take that chunk of text and kind of edit it to be in your own style, or just use it as inspiration and rewrite it yourself. This is super helpful for getting unstuck and getting the words flowing again by getting a different framing of the scene. As long as you are editing the text in your own style, this is a really helpful way to speed through getting unstuck. Because otherwise, we can just sit there for like 20 minutes or an hour or 4 and not be sure what to write and just kind of question our life choices. Testing new ideas. This one I think is the most fun. So if you have ideas for your story that you're working on or ideas for a totally different project, you can use ChatGPT to kind of make a proof of concept on an idea. So let's say you have a chapter and you have 2 different directions you're considering taking it, but you're not sure which you like better. I would at some point just write a rough draft of both chapters to figure out which one was better. Instead, you can have ChatGPT do this for you. Just give it your 2 different ideas as basic scene outlines. Now, it will not be in your style and it won't be written exactly the way you want, but it will give you an idea and kind of a proof of concept of like how it will look if you were to write it. This gives you a really easy way to kind of see the larger picture of a scene or chapter, because sometimes we have an idea for something and it just doesn't come out the way we were originally thinking. And once we're done writing it, it's maybe just not what we wanted or how good we thought it would be. So you are not writing it the way that you would write it. You are writing it in a much faster way, but it's a proof of concept, a draft of a draft, if you will. When we have different or kind of out there ideas, we can explore them and save a lot of time writing them. Instead of spending hours or days writing some interesting sequence that might be kind of strange, but you kind of like the idea of it, you can have ChatGPT generated versions of something that can give you a better idea on how your written version of this might turn out. This can show you potential problems with a scene before you've put in a ton of work writing it. And this really is not limited to just a scene or chapter either. You can have ChatGPT generate a very basic version of a whole novel if you wanted. Again, it'll give you really basic text output, but you can prompt it to write a chapter where this, and this happens without having to write it all yourself. Imagine doing this to proof of concept characters or world building in much the same way. This is a really useful tool for many kinds of writers. So there are some ways that you can use ChatGPT, from a writing prompt generator to filling in the blanks while you're drafting. While I'm not sure what the future of AI generated content and authors will look like, I can see how useful this tool is, and it has some really cool abilities that can help us write better. This is Legends of the Shadow Woods, and I use ChatGPT to generate the entire thing. You can check it out on Amazon, link down below. All right, that's all I got for you, so thanks for watching. Bye!